a woman discovers something horrifying. The food she just prepared begins to rot and mold in the blink of an eye. The terrifying mold spreads from the food to the plates, and then to the hands of the staff. Yet, despite being covered in mold, the staff seem completely unaffected. This is House of Spoils, the high-intensity horror thriller of 2024. At the beginning of the film, a young woman named Elena is introduced. Elena has been an intern for 2.5 years as a Michelin star chef. Driven by her dream of owning her own restaurant, Elena approaches her friend Andres. She proposes that Andres invest in her plan to open a private, custom-themed restaurant. Andres, intrigued by Elena's idea, sees potential in it. Before long, they find an abandoned, old restaurant on the outskirts of town. After some negotiation, Elena rents the property at a reasonable price, because it had been left abandoned for years. The restaurant's kitchen is in a state of utter disarray. Inside drawers, there are rotting fruits left behind by the previous owner and strange crawling insects. Although the place is beyond decrepit, Elena doesn't pay it much mind. She immediately sets to work cleaning the space and renovating it. The restaurant's first guest is a renowned local food critic. In the area, no restaurant is considered officially open until it earns his approval. To impress the food critic, Elena decides to prepare her signature dish, flaky flatbread. However, while waiting for the dough to ferment, something strange happens. Elena notices a black insect inside the dough. At first, she assumes it must have crawled in through a tear in the plastic wrap. Although the incident unsettles her, she continues with her work, but just as she prepares to use the dough, the dough is crawling with countless insects. Overcome with disgust, Elena throws the dough into the trash. Initially, she blames herself, assuming that poor hygiene must have caused bugs to get into the dough. She quickly abandons the flatbread idea and decides to prepare something else instead. But when she opens the pantry, Elena is stunned to discover that all of her food has gone rotten and moldy. She's certain that she put those ingredients into the storage only half an hour ago. How could they have spoiled so quickly? With time running out before service, Elena has no choice but to use whatever side ingredients she can find. Meanwhile, the food critic and his wife have already taken their seats in the dining room. Impressed by the restaurant's elegant decor, the critic remarks on the pleasant atmosphere. Elena brings out the first dish, a vegetable salad. Fortunately, Elena's culinary skills shine through. The salad is beautifully plated and crisp in texture. Seeing the critic's satisfied smile, Elena quickly serves the second dish, roasted crisp bread and black rice. However, as the guests chat, Elena suddenly notices a bug crawling out of the rice. In a panic, she secretly crushes it before anyone sees. But before she can breathe a sigh of relief, more bugs begin to crawl out of the rice. In a rush, Elena knocks the critic's spoon away. But when she looks again, the bugs are gone, and the plate appears completely normal. The awkward moment leaves Elena feeling flustered and embarrassed. She quickly made up an excuse, saying there was something wrong with the spoon. Andres seized the moment to smooth things over, explaining that some defective utensils had been purchased during their supply run. With Andres's quick thinking, the critic's suspicions were finally put to rest. Although Elena's dishes were excellent, the critic still seemed dissatisfied. With a polite yet apologetic smile, Andres saw him out. However, when Elena returned to the kitchen, she found it had been turned upside down. Just then, through the window, she spotted a rabbit. Elena assumed it had wandered in to steal food and was responsible for ruining her ingredients. Furious, she grabbed a kitchen knife and chased after it. The rabbit darted into a patch of tall grass nearby. Elena followed and stumbled upon an abandoned garden hidden behind the overgrowth. The garden was full of strange plants so unusual that even the well-traveled Elena couldn't recognize them. At that moment, Elena noticed a red pepper nearby. Seeing insects crawling inside the pepper, she suddenly realized the bugs had come from this garden. That explained why she hadn't found them earlier while cleaning. Back at the restaurant, Elena decided to call a professional pest control company to deal with the problem. But to her surprise, Andres was waiting in the kitchen with a frustrated expression. It turned out that, without the critic's approval, the restaurant's opening wouldn't earn the reputation it needed. Worried about losses, Andres announced his intention to pull out of the investment. Desperate to save her dream, Elena begged Andres for one more chance. She promised to create a new menu that would amaze everyone within 2 weeks. If she failed, she vowed to take responsibility for the entire initial investment herself. Moved by her determination, Andres reluctantly agreed to give her 2 more weeks. Over the following days, Elena tirelessly worked to develop new dishes. She even came up with creative ways to improve plating presentations to make the dishes more appealing. But no matter how much she adjusted the flavors, the food tasted strange and off. Nothing seemed to work. One day, frustrated, Elena spotted the red pepper from the mysterious garden. Curious, she tasted it and discovered that the pepper was surprisingly sweet and carried a fragrance unlike anything she had ever experienced. Excited, Elena rushed back to the garden and sampled other plants. To her amazement, each plant had its own unique flavor. It finally dawned on her. The garden was actually a spice garden. Assuming that the previous owner had cultivated it for convenience, Elena harvested the spices, carefully sorted them, and began experimenting with her recipes. To her surprise, adding the plants to her soup resulted in a delicious and rich flavor. As Elena examined a small insect crawling across the table, a bold idea struck her. She caught a few of the bugs, roasted them in the oven, and ground them into powder. She then added the powder to the soup. Her assistant looked disgusted by the dark, unappetizing dish, but with Elena watching eagerly, she reluctantly tasted it. To her astonishment, despite its strange appearance, the dish was incredibly tasty. Her assistant's approval filled Elena with pride. Determined to preserve the distinct flavors of each plant, Elena began studying extraction techniques and continued refining her presentations. After 2 weeks of hard work, the new menu was finally complete. In order to get the restaurant's popularity soaring from the word go, Andres invited many wealthy people. However, on the night before the opening, disaster struck again. A strange man suddenly appears in the kitchen, thinking he's a thief. Elena goes to confront him, but she's met with a horrifying sight. The man is gnawing on his own fingers. Luckily, Andres is nearby and immediately calls the police. From the assistant, Elena learns that this man was the previous owner of the restaurant. The place had once been successful, but one day, the owner inexplicably went mad, and the restaurant was abandoned until Elena rented it. The assistant also reveals a local legend. The restaurant was originally the home of a witch. Ever since the witch's mysterious death, strange things have been happening there. Hearing the word witch, Elena remembers the mysterious garden. It suddenly hits her the plants in the garden aren't ordinary spices but the witch's herbal remedies. That explains the unique flavors her dishes have had. Fearing the plants may be dangerous, Elena decides to stop using the extract she's prepared. However, as she rushes to prepare the dishes for the big event, the strange phenomenon happens again. Freshly made food begins to rot and mold right before her eyes. Even worse, she sees the mold crawling up her assistant's arms, yet the assistant seems completely unaware. Believing it to be her imagination, Elena orders the assistant to serve the dishes, but when she turns back around, all of the food has rotted. Trying to stay calm, Elena forces herself to continue cooking, but in a distracted moment, she accidentally slices off her finger. To avoid delaying the opening, Elena gritted her teeth and continued cooking. Seeing the chaotic kitchen, Andres steps in and insists that Elena go to the hospital. He takes her down to the wine cellar, suggesting the assistant handle the rest. Elena refuses to leave, determined to see her restaurant open. Frustrated, Andres locks Elena in the wine cellar. Elena shouts for Andres to open the door, but he leaves without looking back. Suddenly, the wine cellar begins to shake violently. Thinking it's an earthquake, Elena hides in a corner. When the shaking stops, the cellar is in ruins, littered with fallen debris. That's when Elena notices a hole in the wall. Believing it might be an escape route, she crawls into the narrow passage. She crawls for what feels like forever, but there's no exit in sight. Just as she was about to turn back, a skeleton appeared in front of her. Next to the remains, she finds a carved message. The skeleton is revealed to be the missing witch. The message on the wall tells her tragic story. The witch had used her herbs to heal villagers and became well known for her remedies, but her kindness wasn't met with gratitude. Instead, the villagers accused her of being an evil sorceress. One night, they set fire to her house, hoping to burn her alive. Panicked, the witch escaped into the cellar as the flames consumed her home. She tried to dig her way out through the passage, but the smoke and lack of air ultimately suffocated her. Before her death, she engraved her story on the walls. The plants she'd cultivated weren't poisonous, they were medicinal herbs meant to help others. Looking up, Elena notices a small opening above her. The witch had been so close to escaping. Taking a nearby shovel, Elena begins digging upwards. Finally, she breaks through the surface and finds herself back in the abandoned garden, covered in dirt. Elena stumbles back into the restaurant. Seeing the food on the table, she grabs a piece and eats it in front of the startled guests. Her crude behavior unsettles the diners, and many begin preparing to leave. Andres tries to salvage the situation, but at that moment, Elena sets up a bonfire in the courtyard. The strange scene draws the attention of curious guests. Seeing the rabbit in Elena's hands, Andres suddenly realized Elena was going to roast it. He quickly instructed the servers to set up tables and chairs, while Elena had already set up a large pot, throwing in the roots and herbs she had gathered, starting to simmer a fragrant broth. Before long, a pot of rich curry soup was ready. Elena swiftly sliced the roasted rabbit, poured the steaming curry broth over it, and served the dish. One curious diner couldn't resist taking a bite. As the guests' expressions turned to delight, Elena finally smiled with satisfaction. Thanks to her efforts, the grand opening turned out to be a resounding success. That concludes the story of the 2024 horror film House of Spoils. That's all for today's recap. See you next time.